So if you remember, we said a firewall for people. A firewall can only protect what it's in front of. And now, People.io starts to sit in front of this data. Yes?
So like you make personalized ads, but how do you get the data for that? Isn't that technically what the other companies do?
Absolutely. So the other companies do it, but when the other companies do it, they're collecting it, not telling you they have it, and then they sell it to other companies. So for example, if you share a piece of information with someone like Facebook, the thing that they were taken to court for recently was because they just gave that data to thousands of other companies without you really realizing it. So in here what's happening is we're not giving that data to somebody else. So I'll give you an example. Imagine you sell flowers in London. So you've got a florist in London. Now when you create a campaign, an advertising campaign in our app, the first thing you could do is actually send a question to all of the men in London saying, do you have a girlfriend? And if that person says yes, we'll ask them another question. Did you buy them something for Valentine's Day? Now if they say no, obviously that's very naughty and they should have, but if they say no, we now know that's a man in London that's got a girlfriend that hasn't bought them anything for Valentine's Day. So for the florist, we can obviously show the content that florist has to the person. But importantly, the florist doesn't actually need the information about that user. They just need the opportunity to show the content to that person. So the user's privacy is safe, the florist gets to talk to the right person, everybody wins. So since we launched the app last, yes?
But what is your company gain from that?
So what we gain from that is for every pound of money that an advertiser spends, we give a big portion of that to the user, and then we keep a small portion. So if you think about, so when you have a bank card, when you spend money on your bank card in a shop, what happens is Visa or MasterCard or the company that handles that, they take a small little fee off the top of that for helping you share that money between two companies. And that's what we're doing with data. So, since we launched it in February last year, we've had about 103 million questions answered in the app, which is pretty good going. These are some advertising stats. Lots of people view the content. In the advertising industry, CTR means click-through rate. So when you see those banner adverts, people click on them, right? Well, they don't. So advertising normally has 0.05% click-through rate. And because our users control their data, and we can be more effective and better quality, we get far higher. Users quite like it. We were trending above Love Island, which is pretty good, but unfortunately below Tinder, which I was upset about. We've built this great team of people. We're very fortunate to have some amazing investors from lots of different companies. Last year, I got to ring the stock market bell in New York because we were named their rising star. We launched a product in Germany with a big telco company. We get lots of press coverage, and I, for some reason with no education, do a lot of work with the government to help them understand what's going on with data. And so you think, it's great, the world is solved. People.io will save the world. Unfortunately, it's not that simple, and here's the fun stuff. So, normally, I really want to play Elton John's Circle of Life when I start this section. So I kind of feel like everyone needs to see this is how the world may end. But hopefully, we'll be able to save it before that happens. So imagine Elton John is singing in the back of your head. This newspaper, The Economist, recently said data is the world's most valuable resource. Data is the new oil. Now, why is that wrong? Well, oil is, yes?
It's a household.
Yes, exactly. So data is infinite, oil is finite. So if oil is finite and data is infinite, how could they be compared in the economy? So actually, to first understand that, you need to think about where data comes from. So first, second, and third party data. This is really fun, really simple stuff. Skip past that. Brooklyn Beckham. I used to use Justin Bieber. He's a little controversial now, so we'll go with Brooklyn Beckham. So imagine Brooklyn Beckham is taking a selfie of himself with his phone. Now, if Brooklyn takes that with his phone and he's the only person in that photo, he owns the photo, right? It's his picture, his face. He took it, no photographer, no fee to anybody else. He owns it. That's really what first-party data should be. It's your data, you created it, your product, you should own it. Third-party data which in a legal term is normally when a company buys data from somebody else, another company. It's like Getty Images. So Brooklyn would upload that photo onto Getty Images, and then a company would go there and pay money and borrow that photo for an advertising campaign. But Brooklyn gets a share of that money. Now, second-party data is where it gets really interesting. So I think of second-party data. Imagine you and me have a conversation, and we come up with some amazing ideas, some new piece of intelligence. That intelligence, to me, is what second-party data is. So this is Google DeepMind back in 2016, I think, where you could upload a photo, and it just adds all this text at the bottom, which is pretty cool, it's pretty fun, but it's pretty scary, because actually, all of the photos that you store on Google Drive, on iCloud, on Dropbox, on Microsoft storage, on any cloud storage, all of those photos are getting analyzed, and they're adding all this information to all your photos. And that becomes scary from AI's point of view, because now, where value sits for data is changing. So, I won't go into the details of this, but think about something that happened recently. So the NHS gave lots and lots of data to Google DeepMind. So about a year and a half ago, NHS gave 2 million people's data to Google DeepMind. Now, they did it because they wanted to make healthcare better. They wanted to save more lives, they wanted to make the hospital better. But the value of artificial intelligence is mostly derived from how smart it is. So if you make a really smart AI, it's really valuable, right? And it gets smarter because it trains itself on lots of data. So, if Google DeepMind got all of that data from the NHS, let's imagine that Google DeepMind is now worth $50 million more than it was before it trained itself on that data. And in 5 years' time, Google DeepMind cures cancer, in part because of some of that data that helped train it. So now it's worth $100 million more. And so they sell that cure to the NHS for $1 billion. Who pays for the NHS? Government, you, your parents, the tax you pay. So suddenly, you're now paying for the cure that your data helped create. But because the value of data is different to the value of intelligence, you don't get a share of it. So lots of companies, and I'm sure today when you've been working with lots of data sets, you have a number that corresponds to all the different data that you're playing with. That number stops the data being anonymous. Go past all of these bits. Who knows what this is? Any idea? Differential privacy. Basically where a company can take two different databases, look up different rows of data and combine it to make one set of data about you, but again, they put a number against it. They say it's anonymous. And Apple use it in their keyboards. Who knows what this is? This is fully homomorphic encryption. So this is what lots of messaging platforms use to say that your data is safe when you send it from point A to point B. The problem is it's encrypted. They also just have a way of analyzing the data while it's encrypted. So that's all a bit scary. Go past that. Who's seen this film?
Welcome to the world's first artificially intelligent operating system. We'd like to ask you a few questions.
Okay.
Are you social or antisocial?
I guess I haven't been social in a while.
How would you describe your relationship with your mother? Thank you. Please wait as your operating system is initiated.
Hello, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Samantha. Good morning, Theodore.
Morning.
You have a meeting in 5 minutes. You want to try getting out of bed?
You're too funny.
Okay, good, I'm funny. I want to learn everything about everything.
I love the way you look at the world.
How long before you're ready to date?
So this guy, Joaquin Phoenix, falls in love with an artificial intelligence. So in his ear, he's got an earpiece, which is this artificial intelligence. And he falls in love with the computer. And the reason he falls in love with the computer is because the computer, the AI, knows more about him than he knows about himself. So the AI can convince him because it knows more about him. I started when I was quite young, so I sold my first web domain when I was 12, and then I had a digital agency when I was 15, and the way I got to that was I was working on the film set for a Vanity Fair film when I was 13, and the sound guy taught me about secondary trademarks and passing off, which is a type of law around domain squatting. So I actually had to teach myself how to build websites to go on those domains so I didn't get sued, so the domains didn't get taken from me. Cut a long story short, I got kicked out of school at 16 with GCSEs because I wasn't academic enough. And now I do this. So most recently I worked in the world's biggest advertising agency called WPP, and I was the Global Creative Technical Director on the Ford Motor Company business. So Ford Motor Company spend about $2 billion a year on advertising, and I was the crazy guy running around, as you can see, causing lots of problems and coming up with ideas of how to spend that money in fun, more interesting ways. But as you'll soon realize, in big corporate companies, you soon run out of energy, and you think, why am I even bothering to tell these people how they can do better stuff? I'm just going to go and try it by myself. So here's the problem that we as a company are now trying to solve. Companies want data, and people need control. Now, when you all start your own companies in the near future, one of the things you'll learn is investors like to hear a problem statement that everyone in the room can go, yeah, I agree with that, that's definitely a problem, 100%. So actually, I don't agree with this sentence, but our investors like it. So companies want data. Well, companies don't really want data. Companies want to make money. That's what companies exist to do. But unfortunately, because of the way some of the people that run the companies think, they now think that if they have more data than anybody else, they'll make more money than anybody else. So that's why that's there. And then I used to say people want control until our investors kept telling me that's not true, people don't want control. And I just got so bored of hearing it, I just crossed it out but left it there to make a point, and then said need control. And the reason people need control is because of things like this. So this is a graphic that shows around 5,000 companies in the marketing technology space. And all of these companies exist to hoover up your data, to collect your data from all over the place, with the goal of creating what they call a unified profile. And a unified profile is basically a company's ability to know who you are, where you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it, to help sell you products and services. And this is very similar to this, where they're looking at different browsing behavior and phone numbers and all these different things. The difference between the two, though, is the first one is a product that a company like Adobe might sell you, and they bring in people like George Clooney to sell the data products. The second is the NSA, the Intelligence Service of America. And so what's really crazy is in the last few years, the advertising industry has realized that actually they're trying to create products that are more enhanced than the secret intelligence services of a country. And that's pretty scary. So the way a lot of that data gets collected is things like this. So on the right-hand side, there's this plugin you can get in Chrome called Ghostery. And what Ghostery does is it shows you all the different tracking technology that's being used on a website. And so on this website that I cross out for industry presentations, but I'm sure you might recognize it, on this website, there's 84 different companies that are tracking you. And with their new privacy policy that they just released, there's nearly 600 companies. So when you're reading about the Kardashians, you're actually giving them a lot of data in return for that story. I'm sure you've all connected to Wi-Fi and coffee shops or in public places before, and it seems like the Wi-Fi is free, but the reality is they're just collecting all of the data when you're browsing the internet. A few years ago, I'm sure you recognize this lovely man. In 2012, there was a person called Shrems, and he sent what's called a subject access request to Facebook. And what that does is basically says to Facebook, you need to share all the information you have about me and send it to me. And Facebook sent him 1,200 pages of data that they were storing on that one person. And that was back in 2012. Think how much they now have. I'm sure you've all seen the feature where you can send an emotion based on what you think of a piece of content, whether you're happy, you're sad, you're angry, etc. So now you're sharing with Facebook what makes you happy and sad, what makes you cry, what makes you laugh. And in fact, Facebook recently was caught in Australia doing a psychoanalysis of people your age to work out what content makes you feel most vulnerable, because that would help advertisers sell you more products. They've recently released a new feature, Messenger Kids, and everyone's thinking this is great, like my kids will be safe, there's no kind of crazy stuff going on, they can chat with each other and it's all private, and look at all these fun filters, until what you really realize is in order to apply those filters to your face, they're actually creating biometric hashes of your face, which give them a whole lot of information. Your demographics, your age, your gender, your race, your religion, where you are, what you're doing, what you're wearing, who you're with. Snapchat is very much the same, and so suddenly that really fun feature of just putting those features over your face is actually quite scary. Tinder, which is another app, they've got 800 pages of data on all of their users, and Google recently admitted they were accidentally listening to people through Google Home. Now, how many people really believe it was accidental? Because I certainly don't. And in fact, when you look back 5 years, when they accidentally were hoovering up Wi-Fi data with their Street View cars, they also said that was accidental.
I actually asked my Google Home if it was recording my conversation, and it went like silent and silent, talking about this data protection or something.
Call the lawyer! That's what Google Home is doing. Calling a lawyer. And there's even now startups that have technology that they'll encode into a mobile app. So when you give the mobile app permission to look at your photo roll, so if you save a photo, that also gives this app permission to analyze all of your photos, to analyze them, and then it uploads the advertising data to advertising companies. And unless you read the privacy policy or the terms of use, you wouldn't even know it was going on. And advertisers, this big multi-billion pound industry that spends £16 billion a year in the UK just on advertising, their argument of why this is okay, people don't care about their data. And the best one, it makes advertising more relevant. Who cares? It's your data, it's your privacy, right? But the one that really scares me is they try and argue that the data they collect is anonymous. Because what they do in the advertising industry is they take your email address away and they take your name away, and they'll just put a random number next to it. So they would say a person that lives at this address with this location that enjoys these things, that's bought this product, if you take the name Nick away from it and just add the number 12345, apparently now that's anonymous. But I think we know it's not. So it's a total fake. Now, here's what we're doing as a company. And I'll go through this really quickly so we can get on to the fun stuff. So we're building a firewall for people. It sounds like a big crazy idea, right? A firewall for people. But actually, when you realize what people like Elon Musk are doing, where they're going to start connecting artificial intelligence into your brain, what exists to protect your brain? If you can connect a computer to your head, who is protecting your head? That's a bit scary. The biggest, most valuable, most important, most critical database in your whole life. And someone can just plug a cable in and off they go. Pretty worrying. So what we're trying to do is create a firewall to protect that. And to start with, we focus on people like this. People who have common sense. So what we've done is we've built an app. And the app that we built is really focused on trying to get people to understand the value of their data. Because actually, the first part of giving people ownership is getting them to realize why it's so valuable, so they want the ownership. So we built this app, you download it, you give us consent, where we actually point out that we don't sell your data to anybody, that you own the data, and if you leave, we'll delete all of the data as well. So all of the promises that no other advertising company can make to you because they're doing the bad things. And then we ask people to enable their location and other services, and nearly 90% of our users will turn on their GPS location. Why? Because they get paid. Because if they turn on their GPS, they'll get paid. Then we start to ask people questions. And they're really simple questions done with swipe cards. And in our team, we've got Sonia, who's doing a PhD in neuropsychology. And I joke that it took someone with a PhD to work out that a better way of asking questions is with a swipe card. But actually, the reason we do that is because you could ask somebody a question that says, here's multiple choices, or a swipe card, and people will answer a multiple choice question more accurately, but after 3 questions, they get bored. and then they just start choosing any answer. With a swipe card, you can ask about 30 questions, and the quality will be the same for every response. So we use swipe cards, but importantly, yes?
Why do you ask them questions?
So we ask these questions, firstly, to get a person to understand that from a transactional point of view, if they share a piece of information, they should get something in return. Because if you share a piece of information on the internet at the moment, what do you get in return for that? Exactly. So we know that data has value. So every time one of our users answers a question, they get paid, which is pretty simple, it's pretty fun. You start earning credits. So this final example, imagine IBM Watson. So imagine you can walk into a room, and IBM Watson, just from the camera that it has connected to it, looks at your face and works out that you have a heart disease. Just from looking at your face. Because that's what AI is designed to do, right? To work out these patterns, to understand things. So Watson now knows you've got a heart disease. Does Watson have to tell you that you've got a sickness? No, exactly. And even if it signs the Hippocratic Oath, which all doctors sign, the Hippocratic Oath says to do no harm, not to save everybody. So Watson now knows this about you, something that could save your life, but it doesn't have to tell you. But let's assume Watson does have to tell you. When does Watson tell you? Does Watson tell you now, while you're here? Or does it tell you in 5 hours, when you're home with your family? Or actually, Watson makes that decision. Because you can't tell Watson to tell you that unless you first know Watson knows that. But if you know Watson knows that, why do you need to tell Watson to tell you? It's a paradox. So how are you going to solve the paradox? You can't give Watson consent anymore because you don't know it knows that. Yes?
What if you can so say Watson knows you have a heart disease or whatever, you can program it to tell you straight away when it finds out, maybe?
Absolutely. So that's one option, but the tricky thing there, and this is where it becomes really interesting, is all of the ethics. Because actually, what happens if you're really nervous and telling you now would make it worse? Should Watson be the one to make a decision whether it helps you or hurts you? And actually, who knows you best? So what we're working on with this firewall for people is actually an AI that will be the adversary. It will act as an agent, an intermediary. So now when you walk into a room, and IBM Watson works this out, every person in the world has their own personal AI that will talk to Watson and say, I think you should tell them right now, because that will save their life. But importantly, the value of data ends. Data has no value when AI becomes a reality. Because AI just knows. It doesn't need the data anymore. And so I'll leave you with an example. Fridges. How do you advertise to a fridge? You can't. So, in a few years' time, when you buy a fridge, or your parents buy a fridge, the quality of that fridge isn't going to be determined by how cold it keeps food, but by the quality of the algorithm you've written to go on that fridge to order the food. But where is that algorithm going to get data about what food to order for you? You're going to plug the algorithm into Facebook so it orders food based on a brand video you like or an Instagram story you viewed? Probably not. The algorithm needs to know about you. How many times you've been to the gym, how much money you've got, if you've got friends over, if you're with family. Where is that data? All of the things you've been working on the last few days, where does the data come from? And so that is what we're doing, giving people ownership of their data. And hopefully that was kind of interesting and relevant to some of the stuff that you guys have been doing. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, very interesting talk. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nick. Well done. Very inspiring, very relevant.